In Nigeria, the release has been ordered of people arrested so far during still-growing protests against a police unit accused of brutality. At least 5 people have been killed since the start of nationwide demonstrations against the Special Anti-Robbery Squad SARS, which has already been banned by the police, but protesters say that they won't back down until more of their demands are met. Phila Haza has more for us from Abuja.
Protesters have poured out en masse on the streets for the 5th day in a row in several parts of the country, including major cities like Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt and Enugu. The protesters in Lagos disrupted traffic on major roads leading to neighboring states, as well as the domestic and international airports. In Abuja, protesters marched to the National Assembly despite the presence of soldiers calling for an executive order to back up the ban by the police. They also demanded the prosecution of SARS officers they say have been responsible for years of assaults on citizens. Meanwhile, thousands of young people in Rivers State and the south of the country defied a ban by the governor Nyesom Wike to protest on the streets. They marched to the government house calling for an end to arbitrary arrest and the use of force on protesters exercising their civil rights. The Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Sunday Dare, has asked the Inspector General of Police, Mohammad Adamu, to order the immediate release of SARS protesters who were arrested during the last week of protest. He says will reduce tensions and help end the protest. More than 100,000 people have signed a petition asking the International Criminal Court to hold Adamu, the police chief, responsible for the alleged crimes committed by members of SARS. But Adamu, in his latest statement, says the force will begin to train officers to carry out the functions of the disbanded SARS unit next week. The government says the families of victims of brutality from the now defunct unit will be compensated after a full investigation. Phil Ihaza, SABC News, Abuja.
Well, our sources in Nigeria tell us that Inspector General of Police Mohammad Adamu has established a new Special Weapons and Tactics Squad SWAT team to fill the gaps that have been left by the notorious police unit, the Federal Special Anti-Robbery Squad SARS. We learned that he has ordered all personnel of the disbanded SARS unit to report to headquarters in Abuja for debriefing. Osai Ojigho is Amnesty International Nigeria's Director. She joins us now via Skype from Abuja. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program. So these protests continue despite the President ordering the disbandment of the SARS, this notorious police unit. And I suppose this only can suggest that the problem is much bigger than just this unit.
Definitely. Thank you very much for having me. What people need to realize is that quite a number of Nigerians and people in this country are fed up of the way the police have been acting and the fact that they've gotten away with a lot of violations in the past. One reason why these protests are continuing is because people know that once they leave, they are not sure that the government will take action. So it's almost a sort of trust deficiency between the people and the government at this stage. The government needs to give the people a little bit more. They need to be sure that those officers who have been found guilty or who are suspected to have committed these crimes are brought to justice.
But it sounds like years of abuse. So that's a lot of violations and a lot of people that need to be brought to account. Is that actually feasible?
It's possible because they've done so many panels, they have the information, they know the people. And even the recently concluded presidential panel investigation that happened in 2018 and ended 2019, there were certain recommendations that were made. But for some reason, there's a lack of political will on the part of the government. And when we talk of the government now, the leadership of the police, the federal government and the state governments in order to hold these officers to account. And rightly so, because when a unit and when people have gotten away with various violations, they think that they're untouchable. And that is why really the time that we're in now is to end the impunity. And people need to see names of people. They need the naming and the shaming of these officers that have killed countless of people using extrajudicial execution, torture, and all sorts of manner in order to terrorize and intimidate people. So this needs to stop, and people need to be convinced that once the IG of police acts this time around, that he's going to fulfill those promises.
It sounds as if the president himself has condoned this behavior for so long, because if it's known and there have been complaints that have been filed and nothing has happened, it must have reached his desk at some point. Hello, Osai, can you hear me? Hello, Osai, can you hear me? All right, okay, it looks like we've lost Osai there. I'm hoping we can get her back, because there's quite a lot of disturbing stories coming out of Nigeria. In fact, another panel report was released, a presidential panel looking specifically into the armed forces, and that was commissioned in 2015. The report came out, but the president has sat on it for 3 years. And people don't know why he's been sitting on this report and what's contained in this report. But again, so we're hearing about this police unit, but the security forces in general have come under question, and a whole presidential panel that was raised to try and look at that. Let's try and see if we've got Osai Ojigho on the line again. Osai, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
All right. I was just saying, there was another presidential panel looking into the armed forces and their human rights obligations, and the president has been sitting on this for 3 years. Has there been any reason given by the presidency?
We've not received any tenable reason why they haven't released the findings of the presidential panel that also evaluated abuses by the military. And we've seen that this is a pattern in the Nigerian government over the years. So not just this present administration. Panels will be set up, investigations will carry on, and reports would be presented, but they are never made public. And people go away feeling like things have not been finalized and things have been swept under the carpet. It just gives this impression that there are many people above the law. And we're in a situation now where many of the security agents, the police, the military, just act with just this high level of disregard for what the civilian population want to do. So this is why human rights violations have continued to rise in certain cases, and why there's a general dissatisfaction with the justice system, and why it's important that the underlying issues which have affected the security architecture in Nigeria needs to be addressed. But most importantly, for everyone who has ever perpetrated human rights violations to actually face justice in the court of law. So really, that's our demand. If you want impunity to end, and if you want there to be peace all around, then it's important that no one can escape the law, and everyone is treated equally before the law.
It's shocking to hear what some of these witnesses have said about the security forces, rape, torture, forced disappearances. And again, I keep coming back to the president's office. Is there a fear of the police and the security forces that the president can't force action?
Well, I think it's not about whether he can force action, it's whether they would go all the way. Because investigations have started before. Then along the line, it seems prosecution is stalled. Officers have been deployed. There's no proper monitoring mechanisms to ensure that cases that they've started are concluded. And what we're seeing now, and the energy that we're getting from the ongoing protest, is that people are saying enough is enough. We want the country to work for everyone, and you don't have to be in power to feel safe. And so please do your job. So basically, that's the message people are saying. Please do your job. We're tired of excuses. We all want to have a better life, and we can have it. So kindly do your job and ensure that all those who are responsible are removed, and those who can actually lead us to a system whereby equality, fairness is recognized, and human rights is a high priority and treated as such, is what we want to see. And so it's about holding our leaders accountable and asking them to do the right thing.
All right, so we're hearing that Inspector General of Police Mohammad Adamu has established this new SWAT team. Is this going to be more of the same? I was speaking to somebody yesterday, one of our correspondents there, and he says that what's probably required is a retraining of police in general, not just changing the names of these units.
I think that we shouldn't confuse issues. One of the core demands that our report, Time to End Impunity, made to the federal government was for them to ensure that officers act within the law. So if you have a unit that has been marred with a lot of violations, it's important that there's a complete overhauling and not a transfer of one group to the new unit. So the first step would be to identify those who have complaints against them and make sure you treat them separately in order to ensure that you don't end up putting people who have a lot of complaints and violations in their hands into the new unit. It means that it's going to fail from the start. The second then is that for those who don't have existing complaints and are not currently under investigation, to test where they are at this stage before the new unit is formed. And in any case, there's nothing that says that current officers within the force and incoming ones cannot be trained and facilitated in a way that this new unit would serve the people and will abide within the law. I think what is really crucial is that the foundations of this unit must be based on human rights. It must be based on the principle of equality and fairness. And most importantly, all the officers would be liable to the hierarchy and also to the oversight mechanisms. One of the situations we've seen is where certain officers were removed from the hierarchy, making disciplining of officers a huge task. So this unit, the design of this unit would need to be closely monitored. And it's good that at this stage, they're already talking about involving civil society and experts in the design, because we don't want the mistakes that happened with SARS to happen in any unit in the police force. And most importantly, that they are able to also report back annually to us in terms of what they've achieved, and if complaints have been raised, how they've addressed it. We need to make the police accountable to the people and to the civilian oversight mechanisms that exist within the law. That is the only way that we are sure that this new unit will act within the law.
All right, so there are many, many people who want justice because they've suffered at the hands of these security forces. And I'm just wondering how that might happen, because you're almost asking them to investigate themselves. How else can we get to the truth and get those that violated human rights brought to book?
So it's really important that the panels that are set up is not just involving police officers. It has to involve an independent makeup, and that's why the terms of reference of any investigative panel needs to be clear. In the past, they had the National Human Rights Commission constitute a panel. So in light of the recent developments, I think the panel has to be broader, involve representatives from the different justice mechanisms, civil society, youth groups, women's groups, and ensure that whatever comes out from that panel, if the recommendations are to prosecute offending officers, that should then be moved to the civilian courts. And if it regards ways in which the police force should be better organized and should better respect human rights, then those recommendations should then be clearly set within a set of guidelines and also within a timeline. In the past, one of the challenges we've had is that even when recommendations are made by government-led institutions, there's no timeline, there are no indices for us to monitor and to hold them to account. So this is a whole new process that should involve all the relevant actors and to ensure all the voices of those who have been affected, women, young people, families of victims, survivors, have taken into cognizance so that we can have results that are actually survivor-centered and actually provide the recourse that the victims need in order for them to move on with their lives, and for us all to get that assurance that these sort of violations will not happen again, and if they do, they will not be tolerated by the police leadership and the government, and that officers know that it's no longer business as usual.
All right. Well, we wish you and the people of Nigeria the best of luck in resolving some of these very difficult issues and finding some justice for the victims of excess. Thank you so much indeed, Osai Ojigho.
Thank you.
All right. That's Nigeria's Amnesty International Director, Osai Ojigho.